Good evening, good morning, and perhaps good afternoon, everybody around who's watching this, attending today. We appreciate you showing up today. What we're going to dive into today is we're going to talk about some agents, kind of extending. Again, we'll say part two, right? Part one was we kind of got into Copilot. We demoed co-work, and we were going into those things. But now we're going to kind of shift a little bit from assuming we have all of that in place, assuming that we have, users are using it. Now we're kind of taking it to the next level, right? To where we're going to start using agents and whatnot. So we're going to be building out some agents together. We're going to looking at some of the Microsoft ones. We're going to build one in SharePoint and in chat, and we're going to show just what that looks like, use cases around those types of things and whatnot. But I'm going to kick it over here to get things started. Kick over
Yeah.
to James.
Hey, everybody. So James Hammond. So I'm a Copilot solutions engineer here at Microsoft, and I have the pleasure of starting this talk off. So thank you so much for Netrix for having me there. And wanted to spend a little bit of time just kind of revisiting the journey as Michael was just speaking of, right? And my colleague Brent kind of walked through this kind of employee journey as he described it, right? Where we're looking at personal productivity, looking at some specific use cases where maybe we have some custom prompts and things like that. And we're starting to get into the realm of agents, right? And, as we look across this, kind of spectrum here, you'll notice that frontier employee is on the far right. You'll see here that Brent kind of characterized this as like a utopian experience, right? Where we become essentially an agent boss. And as y'all looked at co-work last time, you probably got a sense of what that's going to look like in terms of being able to kind of kick off an agent to do some tasks for you and do some things. And you're really just kind of monitoring its progress and, interacting with it as needed, right? But as we start to think about this, I just want to take a moment to kind of talk about, as an organization, what that tends to look like, right? As we all become more and more agent boss-like. And at Microsoft, we have this archetype organization that we call the frontier firm. And they are human-led. So the human-led piece is crucial because we don't have agents that can really replace our experience, our expertise, and they're still dependent upon our authority, essentially. But they're agent operated, right? So we're kind of managing those agents. And they buy intelligence like electricity, right? So intelligence is commodity. You see the models coming out, right? They're leapfrogging each other from the different providers, right? And so all of that is utility, right? So I can kind of select which models, and in our service we have model choice, right? So you can choose those things. So very accessible, but we want to put that intelligence to work like an employee as a frontier firm, right? Where I can start to kind of push commodity work to AI, right? And really have my people focus on things that are truly differentiators from our organization, right? So administrivia, minutia, all that kind of stuff. Very easy candidates for the types of agents that we'll be talking today, right? And as we start to, kind of shove more of that work off to AI and focus on more strategic things, we're able to compound that value like interest across the organization, right? So, and this is just some patterns that we've seen as we've worked with organizations that are on the journey to becoming a frontier firm. And these patterns, some people will show it as phases, but I really think of it as patterns, because the reality is that we're going to operate across these different patterns as individuals in our organization, as functional areas within the organizations. And so we'll see these things play out in different ways, right? But that pattern one really, I have an AI assistant, right? So I go and I can have it help me organize my day, ask questions, and help just kind of navigate my work as it is, right? So get answers faster, I can do things quicker. And that's where we start to build proficiency, right? So some competence with this platform and understand how to use it to get the results that we want from it. And then we start to shift into pattern two, right? Which is going to be the more human-led agents, which Michael's going to walk us through here in a little bit. But we're able to kind of, once we build the competence, right, we can start to kind of package up our prompts and things like that as agents, share those with team members, right? And then we start to build some confidence with these agents, right? Some trust, because we're able to see firsthand, hey, when I hand off this work, this agent's able to kind of do this in a way that is consistent and things like that. And once we build that confidence, then we're ready for pattern 3, where we can start to really farm out that work to the agents. And we start getting into more autonomous type patterns there, where I am now setting the direction. Pardon me one second. So setting the direction for the agent, and really just monitoring the exceptions, right? So when does the agent need to come back to me and check for my expertise, my experience, or my authority to continue on, right? And so think of me as being that agent boss, right? That kind of utopian-like experience where I have a team of agents that are affecting change on my behalf, right? And so as we think about the agents there, right, we have spectrums of agents that we'll see, and typically this, kind of from left to right, grows in complexity, right? So by a simple agent that's just generating summaries and things like that, relatively basic. That's kind of a next finish operation. Retrieval agents, where we're doing a bit more reasoning over things and providing, grounded responses, and maybe even doing a little bit of synthesis of the content, right? So that's going to be a little more sophisticated, but still very approachable. But as we start to work with these agents, right, and hey, it's great at generating content and summarizing. It's pretty good at, helping me find answers and kind of synthesizing, new ideas and those types of things. Many times we settle on, hey, this is all great, but I would love it to start to take some action on my behalf, right? And so this is where we start getting into more action-based agents. I think it's probably, oh, nope, it does not have a load there. Apologies. And so as we move from left to right, these things kind of grow in sophistication. They also grow in terms of the needs around governance and maintenance and those types of things. So your, IT organizations, your security and compliance organizations are going to be looking at these things, and as we move from left to right, wanting to apply more things around it. So we talked about agents quite a bit. I do want to lay some anchors before Michael gets in, just to think about kind of like the anatomy of an agent, or kind of like what these agents need. And you'll notice, you can kind of imagine to the left of that orchestrator, I have my user, right? The person that's asking a question, right? That orchestrator is really functioning as kind of like the traffic cop of the agent, right? So it's going to receive the prompt, and then it uses foundation models to try and understand the intent, right? What's the question behind the question? What's the goal? As you're crafting good prompts that you likely learned about last time, right? How are we identifying what we need and kind of how this agent should go about it? Now, once it understands your intent, it will start to look across its tool belt and its knowledge repository, right? So knowledge is all about your retrieval-based, retrieval augmented generation is the pattern. You'll hear people talk about RAG. But what that does is it provides essentially a library of content that agent can use to source answers from, right? And I want you to think about it like a very sophisticated search, right? So like if I think about like opportunities from a CRM or something like that, right? Hey, give me the latest status on XYZ opportunity, right? Or like, what are my open deals for this particular client? So we can retrieve those as knowledge. But there's also this concept of tool. And so knowledge is generally based off of an index. It's not real time, it's read only, right? But there are things that I may need to do something more real time or have like read write access, or maybe like some natural language to SQL type interactions, right? And those are our tools. So tools allow us to interact with APIs. This is where maybe MCP servers would fall under. I would probably lump, agents kind of like somewhere in there if we're doing A2A. But that's our ability for our agent to take real-time action, right? So the orchestrator is going to look across those things, understand what tools it has, what knowledge it has, what the descriptions for those are, and then it will use it to achieve the goal. And then you'll see deployment channels up there, right? So within our tooling, right, we're typically publishing the M365 Copilot, but we have other channels there with the likes of Studio and Custom Dev. So as we go through this, I want you to think about, that little orchestrator using the foundation models and kind of what it needs to leverage to be able to accomplish the goal that you're setting for it. And I think at this point, yeah, we'll revisit this. So just kind of bring us back, right? We're on this journey to be a frontier employee. But I'm going to hand off to Michael here to take us through some exercises and round out our little talk. Thanks.
Thanks. Yeah, so this is kind of where things are going, right? And you've probably heard, I've heard this, a couple different things, like this is the year of the agent or whatever, right? So it is very much the case, and again, this is what we've seen over the past couple years is folks are getting more comfortable with kind of the chat interface and kind of looking at a broader data set of things to ask things, right, within Copilot to do those for them. Now we're seeing more shift towards agents. And again, you've probably also heard it where they say there will be more agents than people, right? Because I'll have the ability to create many agents for my day to day, right? And it's just another way of being able to, kind of augment what I do or create things. Again, we're going to talk about all this stuff when we get into these agents, and I'm going to kind of walk through some of the Microsoft ones initially, right? That are kind of out of the box, if you will, and then we're going to build some together and just kind of talk about different uses of those. But Copilot is, kind of the UI for AI. We have, Studio where we could build some other things. We'll hopefully get to that later today. Some studio stuff, and then again, these are the agents that kind of run in the background of these things. And again, just for clarification of kind of the difference, because again, this is a great slide because I get confusion sometimes of, well, what's Copilot? Was an agent? Is Copilot an agent? Right? Copilot needs you to do stuff, right? It needs you to ask it things. It's your assistant. It's your assistant sitting right next to you, right? Basically, every employee will have, a Copilot, and again, it's your personal assistant helping you draft that email, having you create that PowerPoint presentation, right? You're giving it direction. It's doing the thing that you asked it to do. Agents, on the other hand, are something that can run autonomous. Again, not to say it doesn't have to. You can absolutely, as a user, invoke an agent, as you'll see today, and it will perform tasks right on that. Again, some of them could be automated, right? Some could be processed. And what you're kind of looking for is more repeatable types of things, right? And if we're kind of thinking like in the HR space, right, that maybe I'll have a policy or an employee handbook. And again, one of the things you'll have to look at is, and again, what we always like to say, and if you've ever seen any of our other webinars, is we always like to say, like, kind of find the problem first, because that problem is going to help you measure was this a success or not, right? Because what I've seen a lot of folks do is they'll just get Copilot and they turn it on. They're like just hoping something happens, right? They're hoping some ROI or something is going to happen there. But you have to look at what is Copilot going to fix, or what's an issue you're having. So again, one of the examples we have and we work with a lot of customers on that I'll demo today is like around policies. Like I've heard, again, every company's different, but I've heard lots of things where it's like 20 or 30% of the time HR individuals are answering routine things, right? Whether that's via Teams in an IM or an email, right? That goes out, or even phone calls for some of those people who still use the phone. Um, that's a very common workplace thing that HR is answering the same question, whether it's every week or whatnot. And even though there might be an FAQ or something out there on a SharePoint site, a lot of folks don't necessarily go to it, right? If there's kind of like a not a company culture around going to the internet or whatnot, that it's the information's out there, but folks just don't know how to get to it. And this is where, again, an agent can come in and help greatly with that, where those repeatable, same thing, we know this is always being asked, give it some context, give it some memory behind of what it should be answering, how it should be answering. And then it's kind of that's in that case, it's like the silent HR person, right? I can ask Copilot about this said thing, and then it will be able to answer it just like an HR representative would in the way that I want to. So, again, one of many examples of what that could look like. Here's kind of, I will say, the flavors or the progression of different agents. We're definitely doing the first two here. We will hopefully have time to dip into Copilot Studio. I don't know if we'll have time to build one, but I have one that's already built, so we can walk through and talk about some things, because I think there are important things to understand within that. And then we have Foundry, which is another animal. Let's kind of take these kind of progression through these. So one of the first things we're going to do, after we've looked at kind of the out of the box ones, is we're going to build a SharePoint agent together. Now, this is a real thing, a real use case that I'm going to show you. It's actually a use case here at Netrix. This isn't the real data, obviously, but I'm going to show you exactly what that is. But this is what I consider like low hanging fruit, because you could take someone from within a SharePoint site. They can grab, 3 or 4 documents or a library or other content, a mix of that, right? A folder and 3 documents, whatever that is. And you can basically say, you're an agent now. And then you can begin asking questions about that agent to it. It's grounded in that data, right? It's a great kind of low hanging fruit to help out. Again, we're going to get into a use case that I think will hit home with a lot of folks in HR. Then we kind of move it to the next, which is the agent builder, or I call it the chat builder because that's where you build it in the chat. Um, but with an agent builder, now what happens is we still did all the things that we could do within the SharePoint agent, but now we're allowed to now add on some external links, or maybe it create imagery in there if that makes sense for it and whatnot. So now we're kind of taking that, you know, first level, bringing it to the next level with a couple more capabilities around it, right? And then we move into Copilot Studio, which does again everything that a SharePoint agent does, everything the agent builder does. But now I can do other things. Again, I can connect to MCP servers. I can connect to just an external system altogether, right? Like a Salesforce. Um, I can have it do things based off of certain events, meaning maybe if someone asks a certain question, I can have it log a ticket, right, for that, or log a ticket, right? You could absolutely use that. And that's something we've helped a lot of folks with is almost the ticketing, right? Whether that's like a whole company ticketing system or just something more internal to IT, like a internal knowledge base, depending on what the business is, so that IT can go ask these questions that are specific for them, but it's only facing to them, right? We've seen again about a 30 to 40% reduction in back and forth or searching, right? Because again, if you think of like knowledge base articles today, you might type in some sort of search and then you might get like a few articles, and then you'll have to kind of click through those to make sure, is that even it, and maybe it's not quite right. So this is where that can help greatly. And again, kind of a multi-step process to that is that it's connected to, a ticketing system. You can go in, and also a knowledge base system. You could go in and ask it questions when you can't satisfy it with anything from the knowledge base. You could just have it open a ticket about said thing right there. So again, lots of levers in here that can happen, different workflows and whatnot once you get into the complexity of Copilot Studio. Then Azure Foundry, to me, that's a whole nother animal. This is kind of what I would say limitless. And just to give you a couple tidbits of where this could be a very good solution for you is, one of the things I love about it is it has a lot of kind of templates. What I'd say is kind of to get you started off, and that will kind of go into the story I'm about to tell. But also you have at your disposal, it's like 11 or 12,000 different models. So if there's one that you don't necessarily want to use for whatever reason, right? If you want to use some different model like Grok or something, you could do that in there. And the beauty of that is that these different models have different price points of tokens to them, right? So you're not stuck with, just pretend that, and I'll use this example because this is true. Let's pretend that you as an organization said, "Oh, well, we're going to do like ChatGPT and we're going to build everything in it." You're at the helm of their licensing model, of their token pricing, and if they decide to up their prices, you're stuck because you're in the OpenAI ecosystem. When you're in Foundry, you could theoretically use that same model, and then if they decide to raise the price, you could say, "You know what? I'm going to go with a different model that still accomplishes everything I'm trying to do at a much lower price point." So that's one of the great things. And then again, like I said, the templating. So to give you an example, we had a customer that came to us and they were very much set on doing the solution in OpenAI. So we looked at it and we said, okay, so what you're trying to do, there is so much kind of training we would have to do to the OpenAI models to understand. It was around basically image recognition and things like that. There was a lot of training we would have to do that to get to an MVP would take probably 5 to 6 months just to get there, to make sure it's looking the way that it should and whatnot. We pushed them. We said we should really do this in Foundry, and we could do it much quicker because there's so many like vision templates and things like that that we could just use and then slightly tweak those to our needs and then get up and running. We were able to get the exact same MVP up in 30 days, right? So that's the difference. And then again, then they have the option that if at some point this model gets more expensive or another capable model comes out that's just as comparable but much lower, we can flip those levers in the back right within Azure Foundry. You can't do that in OpenAI. You're stuck with the models that they have given you and the prices that they have given you on those models. So again, another great thing, again, the way I like to look at it is, this almost the sky's the limit to what you could, kind of build in the Azure Foundry space. It's kind of just huge sandbox to almost whatever you can imagine, you could pretty much create it within there. And again, we've had lots of success with lots of customers going into this space because of the absolute flexibility that can be had here. Again, not only from a development perspective, but even an ease one. To take one more step back of to talk about that customer, one of their things was scanning multiple things within there and training that. So one of the things we were able to do because Foundry was so what we would call user friendly to get up off the ground with that is that we actually taught the customer how if they were bringing in new data points, how to take these kind of pre-trained models and templates and apply them there. And the customer is taking it from there, right? So they're adding these things themselves. They're that comfortable with it. So again, this is a progression. I would kind of look at it as your average business user would kind of fall into the agent, SharePoint agent and the agent builder. You would probably get into your more power users when you're getting to Copilot Studio and Azure Foundry, and again, possibly even AI or I'm sorry, IT in that realm too, because certain things that need to be set up. But again, there's no right or wrong answer there. We have had some customers that um, a majority of the organization or a chunk of it is doing things within Azure Foundry. So there's no right or wrong answer, but that's kind of just your general rule of thumb of how kind of the progression of these go. Again, this is just another right kind of I guess image. I guess it's exactly what I just said, right? Is we kind of have uh, for end users, right, we have the agent builder for kind of makers or power users, like I would say, Copilot Studio, and then more developer focused, right? But I would also say it doesn't necessarily have to, depending on what you're doing with it. It's like I said, we had a business user in there doing things with vision templates and whatnot, so it's absolutely attainable within there. Just need to understand where you're going with that. And again, that's one more thing that's important on that is understanding kind of the pricing right of those different models, because if you do gotta get to that place that we talked about earlier where there's more agents than people, right, that can add up if you're just taking the greatest model. So one of the things that we see a lot of folks do is some new model comes out, say by OpenAI, and they want to use it in Foundry. We're like, yes, that's cool, but it's also probably one of the highest priced tokens out there, right, for what you're doing. But all you're doing is you're looking at certain, documents and making some sense out of it. Like you don't have to have the latest and greatest model. You can actually go back to an older version of OpenAI if you wanted to stay with that model, and it can do the same thing on pennies on it from what it cost before. And once you add up in whole organizations agents, that adds up a lot, right? If you have, and again, I'm just throwing random numbers out there, if you have 200 agents out there and they're all using the latest and greatest model, that bill's going to be very high, right? But if you have hundreds of agents out there and they're using, again, the model that makes sense for them, which is generally probably an older model that's more cost effective but still does everything that you're asking for it, that could be a fraction of the cost over the course of a year, right? So those are things you want to consider when you begin building in that space for sure. All right, so let's get into it. Let's get into some demo in this real quick. James, I don't know if you had any comments or questions before I get in and get things up here.
No, sir. I think you covered it well.
All right, let me get the right window here. Cool. All right, so we're gonna start in chat here. Like I said, we're gonna navigate a couple of these what I would consider like out of the box, right? Copilot ones, because one of the things is a lot of folks, again, this is just coming from the field of working with users, is a lot of folks don't realize these are even there, right? And what the capabilities of them are. They're actually really great. They could do really great things for you. Um, and again, as I like to say is, and I said it last time, if you were attended that one, is if you look at just something as simple as 5 minutes, right? Um, if you have something that saves you 5 minutes over the course of and then you do that, say 20 times a week over the course of the year, that's like 17.3 hours. Again, doesn't sound like a lot, but once you multiply that times 100 users, that's 1,700 hours plus saved, right, on a 5 minute task that you're doing over the week. And again, I would argue there's way more than 5 minute tasks. There's some that are hours and whatnot. So it all adds up, right? And these are some of these things I'm going to show you, I think, are just in that kind of realm, right? To where doing it here, doing in this piece, it all can start adding up, right? When you're doing things like one I'm going to demo first is a SharePoint list agent. Like I know that sounds like so like who cares? Like I can make a list, but just supplying it a prompt and having it build it out is so quick compared to before. Let's look at it. One of the new ones, right, that I want to talk about. We're not going to demo it today because this actually takes some time to run. Is this researcher agent, right, within here again? Not that the researcher agent itself is necessarily new, but the features that have recent released. So there is this new critique. I absolutely love this, right? So what it will do is I will go in here and ask it to do some research on something. And again, if I pick this, basically ChatGPT will do the first response of it, and then Claude will go over top of ChatGPT and make sure those things are right. And I did this. It was like some obscure law. It was I'm here in Michigan. That's where I'm based out of. That just recently passed. So I wanted to see what it would think of this because the law was really confusing. And ChatGPT came back and it had again. It took probably about 20 minutes ish to do its thing, and ChatGPT came back with kind of some info and a table, and it was listing some things out, but some things on the table it were blank. And Claude came over top of it and kind of checked it and said, like, ChatGPT missed this part. This part's right. This part actually is not right because here's the law right here. And it was just amazing that it went through and basically double checked itself to make sure that I had the most, up to speed, up to recent kind of information on this. And again, I continued to interrogate it and ask it questions. So again, really awesome. If you have not checked that out, I highly recommend you check that out. It is awesome, especially if you're doing any type of deep research where you're just uncertain of certain things, right? Um, Also, again, we have model console, right? So you can have kind of flip between those and use different reasoning models from within there. And again, if you are on Frontier and you have that turned on, you will also have Claude in there as the ability to do that. And again, you'll see that sprinkled out through today, where that will be available in various areas of the demo if you have that turned on. Um, Analyst is very much like researcher, right? It's doing some deep analysis. I think it's said like this is your virtual data scientist. Um, App builder. So app builder is pretty interesting. So one of the things that a lot is kind of the buzz right now is vibe coding, right? So I hate that term. Again, anybody who knows me knows I absolutely loathe that term, vibe coding. But the idea behind it is that you could just take someone from HR or finance and they could just like say, hey, I want an app that helps me every day by doing said thing, and it goes and builds this app. A couple problems with that is one, if they don't know a lot about security or whatnot of building an app, one, that app could have all sorts of vulnerabilities in it if they're just not asking the right thing. Two, it's all of a sudden becomes now an IT burden, right? Because I built this app, now someone's got to figure it out on how to deploy this. And then third, generally the infrastructure of this, right? If it's got databases or whatnot, like where do we put this stuff, right? And how is it secure and all that fun stuff. So that's why I'm not a fan of the whole vibe coding thing. However, Microsoft has a solution to that. And that's what you're seeing here is App Builder is essentially you can go in here and again, also a Frontier piece. You can go ahead and basically kind of have it create you an app, and it will use lists as the backend, almost like your databases, right? So again, this is very interesting, and able to go ahead and create some things out of this. They're visually appealing. They look like desktop applications or web applications in here, and again, you can fully use them, and they're all data protected within your environment if you're using Purview or labeling and all that fun stuff. All of that content is saved under your M365 tenant. So very cool stuff. Cowork, again, we demoed this last time that we were together, so I won't go into that. And then again, we have some page agents and list agents. So we're going to start with the list agent just because I think it's cool. Now, creating a list is not very hard, right? It just is time consuming, right? I would say that depending on what you're trying to do, it might take a while. A great example is if we're trying to do something to where I need to like do a 50 state dropdown, right? I'm going to have to, if I go and create that puppy from scratch, I'm going to have to be typing in all of those 50 states and remember all the abbreviations. Um, and that's going to take time on top of other things that I'll have perhaps in this, right? So what's great is I don't have to do that anymore. I could just tell the list agent to go create this list with said 50 states in it, and it's going to do it for me, right? So let's just go ahead and pop this in here. right? So create a list so Red Crow is just the demo site I'm using today, same site that we used last week within here. And I want it called Acme Shipping Information with columns customer name, address, city, state, zip. So I'm kind of letting Copilot figure out what it needs to. I could have gone in here and said, I need customer name to be a text field, but I'm pretty sure Copilot's smart enough to know that, or this agent is smart enough to know that. For the state dropdown, can you list all 50 states as a choice field with the whole state name spelled out? So I'm sure that would take time to do just that alone, but let's let it do it for us. And usually it will come back and just kind of verify what it's going to build. And then I say, yep, and then it's done. Here we go. Okay, so it found the site I said. That's good. Okay. Basically, it's checking, is there another list that, matches this name? There's not. So now it's telling me what's going to build, right? Single, single line of text, choice, full state names, as I asked it to. And then again, zip, single line of text, gave me an example of what they will look like. And I'm just going to say, yes, create this list. Click that guy and let it go. And we will check in 1 second. And there we go. Very cool. I can click on here, go right to it. And there is my list. And let's just do a quick little verify that the 50 states are there. Very cool, very cool. And there we go. There are my states. Now, this whole thing in and out probably took maybe a minute and a half to maybe 2 minutes from my prompt to this. I would argue that to make this list from scratch, just in those alone, would have easily taken 15 to 20 minutes. So right there, you could see how it took something that was 15, 20 minutes, made it into about a minute and a half, and we're off to the races. So again, it's all these incremental little things that save us, in this case, 15 minutes, 5 minutes, right? They all begin adding up to the real ROI of using Copilot and the agents that are within there. Okay, cool. So now let's move on and let's talk about a real use case here. Um, so these are not real resumes. I actually had Copilot create all these resumes, so they're all fake. But that being said, this is a true story. So our HR came to us a while ago and said, "Do you think Copilot can help us?" And I said, "Tell me your problem." And that's one of the things I always say is find out the problem, then let's try and fix it with this. Just don't turn it on and hope that AI is just going to fix it for you. Figure out what the problem is so that you can say, yes, this is how we got to do it. It's an agent or it's prompting or whatever. So finding out that piece is crucial. So they said to us, okay, so when we open up a job rec, right, that hundreds of applicants put in resumes, but they said about 95 or like, I don't remember the exact number, but somewhere like 95% of the people who have applied or the SOWs that were submitted don't even have that job, you know, role, like experience in it. So an example would be we open a job rec for like an exchange admin, but 95% of their resumes don't even have exchange, you know, work in the past. So I don't know if they just hope that maybe I just apply and you never know. Maybe it'll work out. I don't know. But what this is ended up being for our HR team is there's an individual who deals with all these job recs, and what was happening is she would spend about 2 days, she said she would take about 2 days to start sifting through them and checking them out and basically kind of pulling them apart and saying, yep, this one has exchange, this one doesn't, right? Kind of going through that, quickly looking through that. She said it would take about 2 days to do that, just to sort them. Then once she has the ones that have the exchange, experience, then she says it takes about another half-ish day to go through and figure out what the candidates are for, kind of that role. And again, we have some policy around that. I don't know what it is. Again, obviously it was written to the agent, but I'm not in HR, so I don't remember, but it was something like maybe three qualified or four qualified, and it can't be unbiased, and all this stuff, right? It's got to be unbiased and all this fun stuff and all these rules. So okay, cool. So we went and we created in SharePoint as an agent. And now that same exact 2.5 day process now takes under 30 seconds to do, right? Within it. And again, we'll build it together right now. I'll show you. Again, this is very similar to what theirs are. So let's do it together so we can see what this looks like. And then we'll start playing around with it, right? A little bit. Okay. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm in my SharePoint site. I'm in my library. Again, we'll just kind of take a look at one of these. Let's like open this guy up just so we see there's stuff in it. Cool. Again, I had Copilot make all these for me. Cool, cool, cool. Okay. So one of the things to note is that all of these job recs is for some like designer stuff, right? Like 3D and stuff like that. So at some capacity, they all have that skill, right? So, but what I want to do is start weeding through all of that and get to kind of what makes sense here. So again, once I'm in SharePoint, I can, select one or two documents or a library or five documents in a library, whatever, right? Like your kind of combination of what that's going to look like. I am just going to select all of these. And again, yours might look a little bit different than mine on kind of some of the buttons or how this looks, but understand that, again, you'll have these capabilities in your environment. Again, this button might look a little different. It might say Copilot. I've seen it say other things on there, but just know that anything that's around kind of the AI piece is what you're going to want to select. And then here I'll have created agent. Okay, we'll let that think for a second. Okay, great. So technically we have an agent, right, that is up and running. But let's start getting this going here. So I'm going to call this resume. Let's just call it my resume agent. Maybe it's a personal one, right? I'm not going to share it with anybody. I'm just going to use it for myself. I'm not going to change the image today, but by all means, I recommend you change this image because if you start building a bunch of agents, you don't want them all to bear the same exact icon because it will get confusing, right? People are very visual to those things that if you have one that has a certain color or a certain look on it, they'll know as soon as they see it that that's the agent they should be using if they have access to a bunch of different agents. So my recommendation is that. Two, now I will talk about this throughout today. This is my opinion. The most important things you can do is the purpose, or when we get to it, is kind of the knowledge or instructions, however you want to look at that, like the instructions of what you want this to do. And again, to take a step back and give you a quick little story on that. So I had a counterpart here that was creating an agent in, I believe it was Copilot Studio for our sales team for them to different offerings we have and cut sheets and stuff like that so that they, obviously they know, but also if we get someone new in, we don't have to necessarily uh, do as deep a training by putting kind of the agent in front of them and showing them how to prompt, showing them, where to find our different offerings and things like around that, right? So that will help them a lot quicker than just sitting down. Plus, even if they are taught it, if they're not using it for a little bit, they might forget that we're doing that. Again, they can use it. So she reached out to me and she said, this agent isn't doing anything. And I'm like, okay, let's check it out. So she was typing in some different things and it literally wasn't doing anything. So I said, okay, open it up. Let's see the knowledge. Let's see what you're pointing this stuff at. She had PDF. She had our one pager. She had all sorts of stuff. Everything was there. I was like, good. This looks great. Like all of the stuff is there. So then I said, what is your agent instructions? And all it said was help the sales team. That was it. Right. So that was too vague for it. And I promise you that just tweaking that will make all the difference in the world of an agent that either doesn't work at all, that ends up working, or sort of works to is amazing. Right. So take the time to think about all the things you want this thing to do. And then put that in as kind of the instructions of what you want it to do. Again, I'm going to show mine today. Mine's a book. Generally, whenever I create agents, they are a book because there's lots I want it to do. There's also things I don't want it to do. That's also important to include in there. Again, I'll show all of those today when we get to that, when we get to it. So right now I'm going to put my purpose of the agent. So again, the SharePoint agents are going to ask for a purpose of what they are. So I'm going to put this guy in. Again, they give you a starter run one, right? This is an agent created based on content from the selected sources. I mean, that's very generic. That is true. But now let's see what we got here, right? Let's open this up just a little bit. All right. So this is the resume review Copilot agent, right? So it's designed to assist recruiters, hiring managers, and HR teams with rapidly reviewing resumes against job requirements and identifying the strongest candidate matches, right? So I'm kind of telling it kind of to weigh things based off of this. The agent evaluates resumes for relevant skills, years of experience, certifications, technical competencies, industry background, leadership experience, right? Communication quality, overall alignment to the target role. So again, just saying help me find resumes wouldn't kind of quantify what I'm asking it here, right? Highlight missing qualifications, um, uh, identifies potential risks, inconsistencies, right? If they say something up here and then it doesn't really match down there, right? So I'm giving it some, some definitions of things I want it to do when it's kind of making this decision, right? That I want to check out. Next steps for screening the interviews. Agent is intended to improve consistency, reduce manual review time. Again, this was the biggest piece for us. And then again, help the hiring team focus on the most qualified candidates while maintaining human oversight for final hiring decision. Okay. We're going to go here to our sources. So again, here's all our sources. Again, I could add, perhaps some more. I could add a library or whatever in here. As you see, I have this checked. So I wanted to prioritize these documents versus anything else, right? If that's not what you wanted your agent to do, you could uncheck that. Again, there's no right or wrong answer here. All the while I can test this on the right here. Behavior. Okay, so again, this is just what the user is going to see, the end user, if it's not me, we're going to have this, you know, right? We're kind of seeing our welcome message, our starter prompts, which I'll just put in a quick little starter prompt um, within here. But now I'm about to give it a book because agent instructions, right, provide accurate information about the content in the selected files and reply in a formal tone. Again, that's not horrible. I'm definitely giving it some kind of direction. However, I would argue that that is too vague for what I'm trying to do here. Let's get rid of that. Now we're going to insert my book. Give me 1 second here. Okay. And let me paste this in and we'll kind of skim through this real quick. All right. Let me open this guy up a little bit so we can see a little bit more. Okay. Okay, so again, I'm telling the instructions, right, that I wanted to professional, right, recruiting a resume reviewer, essentially, always be professional, concise. And again, you could just put these things in here in sentences, or sometimes I've seen people do bulleted lists, right, of these things. No right or wrong answer here. It will read it all right through in there. So again, I'm talking about some of the things I said in before, right? Do not, right, make hiring decisions on behalf of the humans and for age, race, right? So all of these things from HR that we would want to make sure that we have this agent, right, that it has its morals based off of what we want, right, within here. So again, talking about, discriminatory hiring processes, all that stuff, fabricated experience, all that fun stuff, right? So we're putting all of that in there. And I'm just going to, just for the sake of this demo, although I'll probably just use it once, I'll just put like a starter prompt. So again, as you see here, how can I help you? We have this, how can I help you? So I'm going to change this one to who has 3D, and that changes right there. All right, so let's go ahead. That's it. Our SharePoint agent is good to go. Let's go and create our agent. And it's done. It's that quick. So let's go ahead and chat with it. So now this has opened itself up into the chat experience, right? But you don't have to. You could still go into SharePoint, and I'll show that in a second. And you can work with it in SharePoint if you so choose to. So again, here we go. Cool. I got my resume agent. It's got the same color and RC that it had before. Cool. I created it. And the site that I created it in, right? So it's letting me know who created it and the site that this SharePoint agent is residing in. And again, I have my, right, my different ones, and I'll use this who has 3D visualization. So we'll hit start, see what that goes for. And usually the first time you run this, it's a little slower than it normally is just because it's the first time it's kind of, booting up, if you will. But once it's kind of made its first pass on it and it answers, then it's generally very quick. But right after you create one, it just generally takes a little bit of time. Okay, cool. So it gave me out of there, the list of people. So I think I have like, I don't know, go back there real quick. What do I have? 12. So I have 12 uh, resumes, and it pulled this many out, right? It's at 4, 8, about 8. Okay. So it's, it cut through there and found just the ones that have this. Again, if this was a need, right? Yes, I got a bunch of designer resumes, but I am specifically looking for this skill. So it's already kind of cut that out, if you will, right? That here's your list, right? And then again, as you see, it's Copilot's really good with that of offering suggestions, right? If I want to whittle this down even more, right? So where I can, narrow this down, right? If I'm trying to kind of make that rank list of these are the people that I should be looking at, we can do that too. But let's go. Let's do a fresh one, and let's ask it's a fresh question. Okay, cool. Okay. I'm looking for a candidate that has 3D experience and the most senior applicant for a leadership role. Who fits this role, and why did you select them out of the rest? So, a couple things are going on here, right? First, I'm giving it what qualifications I'm looking for. It's got to have 3D experience, and then I want the most senior person because I'm thinking of them for a leadership role, right? So that's kind of a component of it. And then not only that, but now I'm saying why did you select the person you're about to select, right? So almost like I want you to show me your work. Like, why did you? I don't want you just to randomly pick someone and I'm like, okay, yeah, that person's great, I guess. I'm gonna have the agent tell me why it selected this individual, right? So let's see what we get. Now I can tell you this is accurate because again, I had to create these and I've looked at these already. These Nestor is the number one, which is why I kind of prompt that particular prompt that way because I want to make sure that it's accurate of what I'm asking it, not just like, oh, I guess so. Um, so again, so cool. I got my number one kind of candidate, if you will, right, based off of what I asked for, right? Leadership and 3D experience because that was criteria I was looking for. But then if you notice, I have this summary. So it's telling me why it selected this one, right? Within there. So, and again, it kind of gives me the second one again, if that's what I'm looking for is like a couple, because I want to do that. Again, gives me a summary of why it chose that one, right? Within here. And then again, giving me kind of the honorable mentions, right? Like here's some that 3D is mentioned, but less leadership, right? So again, maybe that's not what I'm looking for this role, this particular role it is, but again, maybe I'm doing like a two-part thing where maybe I'm looking for new designers in 3D, but also leadership. So this might help bridge both of those in kind of a same ask, if you will, right? That it's given me kind of these are probably the two I should interview for the leadership position, but now it's kind of ranked the remaining ones that have 3D with their experience, just lack of the leadership piece of it. So very cool in my opinion. Like I said, it kind of gives me it's why it came down to figuring out who it is and why it did and all that fun stuff. And again, it's giving me more suggestions, right, to where I can narrow this down even more for something else I'm looking for. But again, for what I was trying to do, that satisfies everything I was looking for. So again, you could see how quickly it is that we were able to get this up. But again, just think in the context of our HR team where this was a 2.5 day process, able to get this agent up and running in, 5-10 minutes, right? We were playing with different things with it to make sure with some data that it was, again, we were modifying some of the instructions that we wanted it to have in there. But in and out, we got this thing up and running in probably 30 minutes, I would say, after the testing and different things. And now, again, they've taken a process that has taken 2.5 days to about 30 seconds, right? So this is a big game changer for them, right? To do said thing. And again, the way that they kind of operate then is when they're ready for the next job rec, is they will remove them. Or no, let me take that back. I think that was like the phase one of it, is they were doing that where they were taking them out and then for the new job rec. But now I think they're still throwing them in. They're just asking more pointed questions to the repository. Could be wrong on that. Again, I'm not in HR. But nevertheless, that's something you could do, right? That this is something that's kind of livable, living and breathing. And let me just go back to, because I talked about how it was in here. So one thing, let me kind of uncheck all these guys. So we see this cool. Is you'll know you have a SharePoint agent is because you will have this agent file. So it will be basically the name of the agent, dot agent file. Again, if you open this up, it's just like an XML file. You'll see kind of all the stuff in there. We'll talk about the different. It will have the starter prompt. It will have the knowledge. It will have all that stuff will be listed in there. All the documents that are part of this knowledge of it, all that stuff will be in there. You could theoretically modify that if you wanted to. Or again, you can modify that in here, or again, you can do that back here in the chat, right? If you kind of go, where is it at here? Right here. So I could go and edit this, right? If there are some things perhaps that I wanted to, change on this, right? And do something different. I'm back in kind of the builder, if you will, right? And I can tweak some things. Maybe I wanted to add some more of the, starter prompts, or maybe, like I said, in our case, we went back and we changed the behavior a little bit. Down here, we kind of changed the agent instructions a little bit around for the results that we were looking for it to do. But that's probably what you would end up doing, right? Is kind of creating this, tweaking that, testing it. Yep, it's doing this, or I wish it did that. Add that as another instruction, and you're going to be good to go. So again, something that you can, low hanging fruit, my opinion, non-technical, right? This is non-technical. This is more, if I'm in HR, I know what I'm looking for. If I'm in HR, I would be comfortable doing this, right? Because I'm not building anything. I'm not writing any code. I'm clicking some documents. I'm saying you're an agent, and then I'm giving it the instructions, no different than I would if I was typing out something to a new hire or to a new assistant, right? I'm going to tell them this is the kind of stuff that I'm looking for. This is what I need to do. And again, if you want to get crazy, you could just have Copilot give you those instructions. Say, hey, I'm trying to make this agent for a resume. It's got to look through it. Think of all the things I should think about, and Copilot could probably chunk out a really nice prompt for you on that to add as instructions in here, right? So we call that meta prompting, when you ask Copilot to make you a prompt and then take that prompt and then prompt Copilot with it, and you get really good results in that. Sometimes if there's something complex you're not able to kind of wrap your mind around how that should be wrapped in there with it. But again, very cool, right? Low hanging fruit. I can, oh, also one last thing. Sorry. I said I was going to say that, show this. I can also use it here. So again, my SharePoint site already has an agent, but now my resume agent is here. And again, who has 3D, right? So I can use it right in SharePoint. I don't have to go into chat if I don't want to. So again, Microsoft kind of meets you where you want to be with things. Again, you can go into chat and tell it to create your PowerPoint presentation. It will make that PowerPoint presentation using that PowerPoint agent, or you could go directly into PowerPoint and within there. So again, you have multiple ways you can kind of achieve the same thing, just depending on how you want to work. So if you have users who just want to use the chat and ask things there, cool. If you have some people that live in SharePoint all day and night, cool. They can use it here too. They don't have to interact with in the chat piece. So again, you have maximum flexibility on how you want your users to use this, or how your users will use this within it. So cool. Let's go back to here. Let's go to here. Oh yeah, one last thing I want to show here is when we get to all agents. So I meant to show this right off the get. Sorry. Um, So this is kind of the agent store, right? So these are where agents are going to live, Microsoft ones, third-party ones, ones that your organization has created. As you see in here, these are my agents, right, that I am using within here. So even though they may not all show up here, these are the ones that I'm essentially using right within here. And then again, these are ones by Microsoft. So you will see these ones out there as they make them available. And again, they're absolutely clearly marked with Frontier, so you understand that if you do have the Frontier turned on, these are those Frontier ones. So they're easily able to be found within there. I won't go into this one today, but another one that I love is the forms one, because again, not that creating a survey is very hard, but I just need to take time to do that out, right? And especially if I have a bunch of bulleted lists or check boxes I want. Here, I just tell it, and it creates that whole form. And just like you saw the 50 states in the list, it will do that same thing too. So it's kind of a win-win, in my opinion, of using some of these ones. And then again, these are ones that were built by the org, right? That are kind of deployed to the whole organization. As you see, we have these by Copilot Studio ones that were deployed to the entire org so they can consume them however they see fit. And then again, we have other ones again where you can go out to kind of the store and find other third party ones like right like Canva and Asana and things like that, right? Jira and whatnot, and get those kind of connections going in your environment with these other third party systems in there. But nonetheless, let's go back here. All right, so now we're going to, so we did our SharePoint agent, very cool. Now we're gonna move into Agent Builder, or as I like to call it, the Chat Builder Chat Agent, because that's where I create it. Um, again, my words, no one else's within that. So again, very cool. Let's go ahead and do what we're gonna do. You can describe what you want here, and then it will begin kind of getting the skeleton of your agent together. I don't do that. I go right into configure because that's just what I do, right? There's no right or wrong answer here. If you want to type out what you want it to do, kind of the description, I will actually put that in as the description. So it's not like you're wasting time doing this. I just choose to get right to it and start building it the way that I want to. No right or wrong answer here. So let's go to skip to configuration. Okay, cool. So I have again my name, the description, my instructions. Again, just like we saw in the SharePoint one, right? But now let's take a little peek. So we got other stuff in here, right? Instead of just being attached to that one SharePoint library or that folder or whatever, now I have other things, right? So I can add in sources from SharePoint or Teams or my email or right out from the web and whatnot. And that's actually what we're going to do today. Is not only going to add some documents, but we're also going to have a link out to the web, right? So we're going to have it do that too within here. Also, it has additional capabilities. Again, the other one is just chat, right? It's just going to, you chat, it brings back a response. But again, this one create documents and charts if you want it to, right? Like if you want that to make a graph or something, you can turn this on or off. Again, depending on what you're building, if that makes sense or not. Create images. Also, you can turn that on or off if that makes sense. For this guy, I'm going to turn that off because it makes no sense for what I'm doing. And then again, we have our starter prompts just like before. So again, like I was saying, this is a stepping stone. So it's doing everything that we could do in the SharePoint agent, right? Instructions, suggested prompts, all that fun stuff. But now I'm going outside of SharePoint. I'm able to get other Microsoft workloads. I'm also allowed to get website URLs, and then again have some capabilities of creating charts and images. Again, still grounded in whatever I'm about to give it, but you have more capabilities within it. So again, it's kind of taking it to the next step if you need these things. And again, that's why it's important to understand what you're trying to do with the right tool. I have a lot of time where someone will take like one document and that's their agent to look at this document and make some sense out of it or answer some questions, and they'll make like a Copilot Studio agent out of it, and it's just for themselves. It's like that's probably overkill, right? If you're going all the way down to a Copilot Studio agent to just attach a single document to it, you could absolutely get away with that in a SharePoint site. And again, if you didn't have access to a SharePoint site, you could create one here for yourself, right, with that you're using within here, and you can also share these out if you want to. But understanding which is the right tool to use. So let's go up to the top. Let's call this our new HR agent because I guess we had an old one. Let's just go with that. Okay. And I'm going to give it this, and then I'm going to show you the documents that we're going to pull in here real quick. Let me give it its description. So telling it kind of what it should do, what it should know, right? These types of things, right? You're basically HR policy and a support agent. So again, this is just what I was talking about being able to reduce repetitive, perhaps questions that come through, right? By attaching certain assets, and I'll show you what those are in here. So again, it's centralized knowledge is around assisting employees with benefits, PTO, leave policies, onboarding materials, and the handbook, right? These are the things that I want in there. Your purpose is to reduce time spent searching through documents and whatnot, improve consistency with the HR related answers. Again, support employee self-service, all that fun stuff. Again, that's where you want to go with these things, right? Now we're going to give it the instructions. These are quite beefy. Get this in here. Hold on, I'm still scrolling. I'll show you everything when we get it here. But it's an HR one, so I want it to have all the stuff in it, right? All right. Like I said, I like to have books on this stuff. So here are my instructions. We'll go through them. Again, I'm not saying you have to do this many. You absolutely don't. But to me, the more details and the more things you give it, the less likely it is to hallucinate, the less likely it is to think, well, I don't know, I'll just kind of go and figure that out, right, on my own. I don't want the agent in this context figuring it out on its own. I want it to be exactly what I want it to do, how I wanted to do it, exactly the way I want to do it. Again, I'm sure most of you on the phone would kind of agree with that too, right? So again, very similar to the top, right? So this help employees and managers and HR staff quickly locate, summarize, and explain information. So again, very similar to the top kind of directions to it, but we're getting into some nitty gritty. So I'll kind of skip over this. But so now I'm kind of giving it its core responsibilities, right? So what you'll assist with. So I'm listing out some things, right? PTO, sick leave, holiday. And again, these would all be things that you would know today, right? If you were in HR, you'd be like, man, we get asked about this like a dozen times a week, right? You could keep that list of those things and that will just help fuel the instructions of your agent so that it's answering those things, right, that you're looking for. Okay. Yeah, we got some of this stuff in here, code of conduct, all that fun stuff. I'm even giving an example in here, right? I'm also saying, encourage employees to contact HR for official, interpretation where appropriate of these. So basically, if they're unsure, um, so here I kind of give an example, right? I basically this is kind of the response I want AI to take is I could not find the definition, the definitive answer to that scenario of the current HR policy. Please contact human resources for clarification, right? So I'm not letting this thing kind of go out there roguely and just answer. I'm saying basically you can't answer. Tell the user they got to contact human resources. So I'm giving it a tone, right? Professional, friendly, helpful, neutral, clear, and concise. Avoid right humor, sarcasm, right? If they're asking about bereavement, the last thing I wanted to do is crack a joke, right? On things like that within there. So again, then I'm giving another if phone or cell phone is asked, refer to a link. So I'm going to be putting that link in when answering handbook questions, right? So I'm kind of getting granular of how I want this thing to do. Again, I think you need to put a lot of time into this. There are times that I knew an agent I was going to build, and it was fairly straightforward in my opinion, but I spent a good 30 to 40 minutes writing out kind of the instructions and then applying it to it because again, the more time you put here, the better this agent's going to be at what you want it to do and how you want it to act. Um, if a policy has an exception, I'm giving it what to do, right? I'm talking about a little PTO one now, right? Whoops. Oh, sorry about that. I clicked off to the side. We'll be back there in 1 second, I think. Sorry about that. Here we go. We're back here, PTO. So again, kind of talk about the PTO, do not calculate balances, right? So I don't want it to do that because then maybe this isn't integrated with our HR system or whatever, right? Maybe this is just a low hanging one that we're doing here. So I'm telling it not, so I'm giving it things that I don't want it to do around these specific topics of PTO and leave and all that fun stuff. Again, don't recommend medical treatments, don't recommend financial investments, right? Those types of things. So then I'm kind of giving it on the onboarding piece. So again, these are all different documents. I'll show you them in 1 second that I'll be adding here in here. And again, I'm giving it kind of different, examples that someone might ask. Again, I just take this from what I have been asked, right, from users in the past. Behavior, and then I'm giving it a do not. I think a do not section or a do not on each piece is important, especially if there's something you don't want it to do, right, in a specific way. I find that very helpful, or not answer something a certain way or whatnot within here. So again, I'm trying to get to the bottom here, telling it never to do anything, right? On here, never, right? I'm putting some guardrails, never share salary data. Not that it has access to it, but I'm just saying that right in there, just making sure never share disciplinary information. So I'm putting some guardrails, right? If someone's trying to like prompt inject it with some things, I'm putting some guardrails in there so it won't do these things within here. And again, how I want it to kind of output things, right? Short paragraphs, bullet points, tables if helpful, right? So I'm kind of giving the instructions I want it to do within here. And then we're almost towards the bottom here. And there we are. So again, I've given it some final kind of output rules, right? I'm saying you got to be grounded in the official HR documentation. So I don't want it looking anywhere else. Again, obviously, we probably have more HR documentation out there, but I want it to be grounded in just these documents I'm giving it, nothing more, nothing less. Um, again, giving it some other things in there. So very cool. Okay, let's get on with it. Okay, so let's go take a quick peek at my HR documents. So these are some of the things that we're going to have in here, right? A handbook, like an onboarding, right? I'll just like open one of these guys up just so we see really quick. So again, spoiler alert, Copilot made all these documents for me. I didn't type any of this stuff. It made all this fun stuff for me. So cool. So we got a bunch of stuff in there. We get the gist of this. We're not going to go through every single document in here, but you get the idea. Okay, so now let's get in here and let's start adding kind of my sources, if you will, right, to this. So let me go here. So it's going to be pretty good on being able to pull some of this stuff. So again, because I, recently opened them, so I got my onboarding guide. That was absolutely one that we wanted. And there we go. It's here. I click it again. I want my benefits guide. Again, that was also one that was in there. Click it again. My employee handbook, that's ready to go. That's exactly what I wanted. And the last one was what, my PTO policy one? Yeah, this guy. Okay, cool. So I got my documents in here, right? It's at that. Again, I could have typed in a URL or something to a SharePoint site and I would have been able to find all those fun things. Very cool. But now I also want to give it a URL in here. So give it that URL, and this is the guy we're going to pick. So again, I have some different toggles on here, right, to where I can reference org charts or use specified sources or search all websites in the world, right? But I don't want that. I want it to actually be limited to just the website I'm giving it. So that's what we're going to keep on there within there. And then again, I'm going to toggle this guy so that we're just going to use these guys that are in here. So this is basically what I'm telling it now is this is all your brain is. This is the only knowledge you can use. You can't go to other sites. You can't go in my email. You can't do any of those fun things. This is your knowledge at the moment. Okay, cool. All right, let's get into it. Let's create it. Okay, let's go to it. Again, I can share it from here. By default, it's private to me. Okay, there is my new HR agent, and of course, I created it. So let's start using, I guess I could have put some starter prompts in there, but I didn't. So let's go ahead and let's just start interrogating this thing a little bit. Explain PTO carryover versus forfeiture, right? That's probably a easy one and probably a very common one, right? That folks perhaps don't get because sometimes those are right. Some of those documents are very legal speak, right? And some of the users aren't like, oh, I don't know, within that. And again, that was one of the demos, if you were here last week, that I actually took a very legal speak document that was on a policy and I told Copilot to basically rewrite it in kind of end user employee sense of language, but keep all of those same rules kind of in place, right? That are in our official document. That's exactly what it did. So again, you could do something similar to that. So, okay, very cool. So it's telling me kind of what it is. Also it's giving me, it's saying below, right? plain language explanation. Remember, that was one of my rules I had in there. And it's telling me it's grounded in my company's official policy, right? Which is exactly what I asked for. So again, it kind of gives me, right? It gives me some different pieces of this, what this means. As we see, it is referencing my the document I supplied it. Okay. So it's giving me even a quick little example, right, of what could happen, right, if you ended the year with 55 hours of unused PTO, 40 would carry over, 15 be forfeited. So again, to me as a user, that probably makes more sense. So I'd be like, okay, I totally get this now within here. So let's do that. So let's go ahead and let's ask it again. Let's make us a little table. I love tables. Again, if you were here last week, you know I love tables. But let's start a new one. I just want to keep doing a fresh one every time I ask it something. So I want to basically a table of the PTO accrual map. Cool, cool, cool. Cool. So it's giving me the accrual right map out of there. It's making a visual of that's exactly what I'm asking for. It's going to go and make that, which I did, right? So it's making that again, still telling me, right? It's based off of this document. It's pulling where that information is from. So very cool. And again, because I did allow it to do that, again, I can also have it reformat, right? Make a visual chart because that was one of the things I allowed it to do, right? Make charts. In there, if I so choose to, it could do that too. Let's do one more. Let's ask a couple more real quick. What's onboarding list for manager, right? So there's a whole onboarding, but what's kind of I'm a manager and I don't know what I got a new hire starting tomorrow. What do I got to do? Kind of give me my list, right, of the things I gotta think about with this. Okay, so I'm getting the breakdown of what happens before day one, right? On day one, right? As a manager, these are the things that I should be doing. And again, it's all referencing my onboarding document. And again, this is a much better user experience than just trying to search for a document, perhaps finding that document, reading it, and especially if it's more legal speak or something like that. I don't know if that's going to resonate with me. Again, I can have it list things out. I can make it make tables as you saw. Let's check out two more real quick. When is open enrollment deadline, right? I mean, again, we probably have this posted on the internet somewhere, but I'm just going to ask the agent to sift through those files and figure that out for me. Okay, cool, cool, cool. And again, it's telling me it's again because I'm asking it. I beat it down and said like I always want to know. You always got to use the sources. Tell me how you got it. So if you see, it's always showing me where these things are, right? Where it's pulling these sources from. So I don't have to guess that it's just making this stuff up. And I'll throw one last one in here. So give me a comparison table of the different coverage options for dental with the different plans. So I'm not asking for all medical stuff, just me and my wife are trying to figure out this dental thing. So maybe that's what I'm really trying to laser in on. So I might have to, instead of going into either a document or if I had multiple documents, one with like PPO and HSA, like I might have to add like two. I'm just going to ask this to go figure it out, pull it all back together for me into a table. Again, if you were on the last call, I love tables. Everything I do, I throw in tables where possible. Okay. Case and it didn't ask for it. It gave me some, payroll deductions, right, as an example of what that looks like in there, right within there. So again, very cool, right? Very cool. I can go in here now, and as a user, a few things are going on. I'm not necessarily bugging HR for these things or anything like that, right? Or again, this I know we're talking HR. You could insert this for so many things, for IT things. You could for legal things, right? Like I got I got a MSA. What do I do? right? Instead of asking the one person in legal that I always know and I am, I could have there could be an agent that covers legal questions, right, for the organization. And again, this is kind of low hanging fruit things I definitely recommend you kind of start with, right? Within here is look at things that are repetitive, look at things that are asked at you every week, every day, every month, over and over and over again. And you're always answering it, whether it's through an email, an IM, or on a site or something like that. Um, Take those things, and that's kind of your step one of the agent right within here. So next we're going to jump. We don't have time to build, unfortunately, a Copilot Studio agent. However, I already have one pseudo built. It's up and it's running. But we're going to run through some of those things because there are some things I want to pull out that I want to talk about that I think is important when you get to this area of it real quick. So I know we got like 10 minutes left. Let me go into this guy. Just kind of navigate some things around here I just want you to be aware of. Or now we've taken the next progression up to Copilot Studio, right up from our SharePoint one, from our agent and chat one to now we're here. So now we have additional capabilities. One, first and foremost, I want you to pay attention to is I have model selection, right? So I have different models I can now pick. Again, the other two, I did not have that option, right? It was whatever that agent was what it was. Um, Not that that made sense, but you get what I'm saying. But again, I have the choice of OpenAI models. Again, if you are turning on the frontier features, you will have Anthropic. And I'm not sure why this is off because I actually have this enabled. I am the admin in here, so I'm not sure why that is off because I was doing one of these the other day and this was actually absolutely turned on. So I have no idea why the Grok one is off, but whatever. The idea here is that I can pick different models. Very much like I was explaining to you before about how giving it good instructions are paramount. Once you get into more sophisticated ones like you're looking at or that you're doing in Copilot Studio, is you could have the best instructions, you could have all the knowledge and all that fun stuff, and sometimes it might just not work the way you want it to. Just flipping it to a different model can make all the difference in the world. So keep that in mind that again, 4.1 is generally what consensus are is a very good um model all around to do the very basic things that are the average things that the average user would want done. However, if you're seeing it is not performing the way you want and you're looking and saying, well, the instructions are rock solid, I have all of my knowledge pieces in here or data points that I want to connect to, and it's just still not doing exactly what I want, honestly, just flipping it to another model can make all the difference in the world. So I encourage you to experiment with that if you're seeing some weird stuff, or just to experiment with it. So again, you see my knowledge here. Again, it's just a couple IT documents, but again, I could turn on web just like we did in the last one. Right now, we're kind of same Z here, but now this is where things get a little bit different in here. Is again, I can bring in other tools to work in here, right? I don't have any tools on this one. Different triggers that can make this activate, right? An email comes in, do this thing, or if a certain word is said, run this agent, right? So you can set up different triggers to activate your agent based off of an event that whatever you write it in there. Agents. So again, it was talked about earlier about A to A. If you weren't sure what that is, agent to agent protocol. So this allows you to have the ability to have agents talk to each other. So to not that this one makes sense, but this is probably the best example to give. Let's pretend that I created an agent and this didn't exist, even though it already exists, that makes PowerPoint presentations, right? And let's pretend that I made another agent that is sales driven, that looks in Salesforce and pulls back my stuff, whatever I have access to. So in theory, I can have these two talk to each other with A to A protocol. So then I could just go in and say, hey, can you look at my last 10 accounts for 2025, my top 10 accounts? Tell me why they were in my top 10 accounts, what we did with them, and what is my projections to do based off of market research of what I will be doing for them in 2027, and put that in a PowerPoint presentation. Right. So what will happen is one agent will go and grab all the Salesforce, make all that number crunching and all the sense of all that stuff, hand it off and say, now here's all the data. Now go make a PowerPoint out of this. Right. So that's kind of the idea behind that, is that agents can essentially talk to each other and offload different things to them for what they need. So that me as a user don't have to remember that I got like 50 agents I got to talk to. I just kind of give my ask and it will go about and do said thing. So keep that in mind. That's where the agent comes in there. Again, you can have, you know, topics that kind of drive through this, right? That gives, certain answers to that. Again, suggested prompts, nothing new there. Again, this is more of the overview, but this is getting more again into the knowledge and whatnot. But one of the ones I want you to check out, again, this one I'm the only one that uses this. There's not too many activity, but let me drop to this real quick because I think this is important. Again, as you see, I'm the only one that uses it, right? So again, this will give you some insights on your agent. Again, you can see the different places I was testing it in Teams, directly here, out in chat, all that stuff. So again, you can start to see things and see how much usage is going on and are people using this. Evals or evaluations, as it said, are pretty cool. So what this will do is, again, it will look at what your agent is. And in this case, I'm looking at help desk things, right? And then I can run an eval on it where it will say, it understands that I'm looking for like a help desk, excuse me, agent. And then it will say, okay, well, here's the most common things that this type of agent is asked, because you're like looking, because again, I have really good instructions that I want it to do. So it'll run a test against those questions and say, like, these are questions you're probably missing that you want to add to it. So then you could take those questions and then you could go and add it to your documents or your sources, wherever that is, or look at that. Or again, perhaps put that in there as a knowledge, right? Or as some instructions. But running evals are great. This is kind of a pre-test before you launch it to against what are common things in this space. Excuse me. Analytics, these are important. Again, this is going to be very grim looking because I'm the only one that uses it. But some of the things that you'll look at again is anybody even using this, right? Again, you can turn on so that surveys will kind of randomly go out anonymously, and you'll get some sentiment analysis around the use of your agent, right? If people are using like the thumbs up, thumbs down, on it, you'll see all those things. So that is also important to see. And again, you'll see some quality of that, so that if you can start to see that the quality of the answers are going down, you'll probably want to go ahead and recheck this and make sure that, again, run an eval on it and make sure that that's happening and maybe new questions are being asked out of it. One of the things I say is with agents is it's not like you do one and you're done at all. They don't work that way. I mean, they do, but you don't want that. You want to constantly go back in every few days or couple weeks, especially when you first launch it, and see how it's being used, right? Is it answering questions, right? This is important. Is this, if it's not, right, we want to figure out where it's missing or what's being asked of it. Because maybe I have this policy one, right, that we just created, and I have those 4 documents, but maybe there's some other HR piece that I'm missing, right? Maybe we have some like other, but like 401k, like a 401k wasn't in any of that stuff, right, of the benefit piece. So maybe I'm seeing all these unanswered things around 401k. I'm like, I forgot the 401k thing. I can add that as a new data source, right, or another knowledge in there, so that it can start answering those. So it's something you're going to want to pay attention to and tweak as it goes along. And then the last thing I wanted to show you real quick was just the different channels. So these are the places that you can send it to, right? Websites. Again, I'm doing mine in M365 or SharePoint. But again, you're not limited to that, right? You can send them to Slack or Facebook or Telegram or all these things. So again, very powerful. This is, like I said, kind of the next step or the next tier of agents when we get to doing the agents. um, that is all I had. Um, any question, James, on anything or comments?
No, I think you did a great job of kind of walking us through the spectrum of agents and the kind of things that would cause us to kind of progress along those lines, right? So as we need additional capabilities, we'll shift from SharePoint into Agent Builder and then to Studio and beyond. Um, I talk to customers a lot about this spectrum and how, like you showed in SharePoint and in Agent Builder is kind of a next finish operation, but there's still tremendous value in that. And so, think about it as that spectrum. I move from left to right, from like low code to pro code. My time to value tends to grow as I move across that spectrum from left to right. And so the thing that I always coach customers on is if you have an idea, if you have a problem that you're trying to solve, like you described earlier, try and land it as far left as you can so you get time to value. And that does two things. One, if it solves your problem, great. If it doesn't, then you have a pretty good idea of what you really need, right? So there's a saying some folks have, like, nobody knows what they want until they have something in front of them. So it begins to be a little bit of a funnel for innovation and for features. So yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
And to that point, I would say, nothing got lost at that point, right? So if you did do a SharePoint agent, you have the instructions, you have the purpose, you have the documents, and it's just like, oh, I need more. Well, you can
yeah,
still copy those out, put them in the next step if you go to the agent builder, right? Put
yeah.
them there. You're already off to the races running with that at least, and then again, you could begin adding in the pieces that you felt that was missing in SharePoint that you now need here. So none
Mhm.
of that gets lost, right? It just kind of progresses to the next one.
Yeah, love it.
Great. Well, thank you everybody for your time for part two of this. I really appreciate it that you took the time out today to spend it with us. And everybody have a great day. And again, don't hesitate to reach out if you have questions.
Absolutely. Thanks all.